One, two, three.
Wow.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
And we can
We
count to three.
We are the Powerpuff Whiskey Girls. Welcome to the fantastic Festive Flavors live stream, the long-awaited double bumper virtual tasting for November and December our turn. I'm joined by Lachlan Watt, our latest brand ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society Australia, and Andrew Derbidge, chairman for SMWS Australia and New South Wales ambassador. Welcome. Thank you all for joining me. I'm Adam, by the way.
Thank you for having us.
That's
Indeed.
okay.
Pleasure as always.
How's everyone going?
I think officially, Lachlan, this is the first tasting event I've done with you.
Yes, it is. It will officially be that.
Yeah, first
Yeah.
SMWS tasting on this side at least as well. So welcome.
There you go. Oh, so we just thought we'd start off really gently with 8 drams to just ease into it. Right?
Yeah.
Is there any other way to do it?
Next year we'll go for 10. We'll try.
Right.
It's I'm not sure about in past years. I definitely know the last couple of years not, but Andrew, in your memory, have we ever done a combined November and December virtual tasting?
I don't recall so, but by the same token, of course, virtual things like this only really came along COVID and post-COVID.
Yeah,
so,
fair point.
You've only got to wind back the clock 3 years, and something like this would never have even occurred. So there you go.
Yeah, good point. And my first virtual was actually at your house with Matt Bailey, and it was the Vault collection.
Oh yeah,
virtual tasting, just all Vault bottlings. It's just good fun. But yeah, we've got some really exciting stuff today, including a couple of special label bottlings and Premium Malt of the Month, which is an absolutely stunning single cask 27-year-old Distillery 35.
I got to say, it's a cracking lineup. The box arrived, and I like to sort of surprise myself and you don't look too much into it till it arrives. Anyway, I've cracked it open, saw the sheet, and just thought, wow, that is a pretty good lineup. That's there's some good stuff here.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited to get into it. I mean, myself and Lockie have already had a little sampler today at Whiskey and Element, which have for any Melbourne members watching, just a little bit. They finally got all their stock. Unfortunately, November and December bottlings were a little bit delayed with shipments, but we're all good to go now. Bottles are getting out there, and I think maybe we should crack into it.
I reckon so.
And thank you for all the people who rocked up ultra early as well. Dov Burns, Dave Cook, Betty. So cask 112.110, bright and dazzling. 60.6%. 8 years old to
I am
start us off.
so excited to taste this whiskey again.
I can't remember the last time I tried this whiskey. I'm trying to remember if it was at the Dictator Audio event or not.
I think it was at Abbey.
Abbey, okay. There are a few there.
Well, that's a unique nose, isn't it? Like that, straight off the bat, that is something different.
Yeah, it's like fresh sawn cedar or fresh sawn pine.
Yeah, but what I find fascinating, you're absolutely right. There's a woodiness to it, and cedar and pine is actually a really good call. But there's also this incredible sharp fruit. And the two are like that. Normally, you sort of get the fruit and then the woodiness comes afterwards, or whatever. But these two are just extraordinary.
Usually, when I see that, I kind of entangle them in a way that I'd explain it like underripe apricots. Like those green apricots, they're not quite, they're hard. They're vinous. They're really kind of astringent. That's where I'd go with that.
Yeah.
Oh. But I'm always a big fan of spirit from this distillery. All of the spirits from this distillery. I know they can be quite divisive for a lot of people, but especially the unpeated spirit from this distillery can really, really blow me away.
Yeah, agreed.
This is I'm getting a surprisingly almost like that tinned peach 128 note on this, which
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting so early in the tasting. Paul Hamilton Brown, this is going to be a messy night. Paul, be
Speak for
positive.
yourself, Paul. Let's,
Yeah, we do this for a living.
just out of interest, we do this for a living. All the comments that you and I are seeing at the moment seem to be on YouTube. Do we have anyone that's tuning in on the Facebook page as well? I'm just wondering whether I should bring that up on my phone just to see any other comments that might be off the side there.
I'm not getting any. I've got Facebook open just here. Let me let's have a look.
Sorry, didn't
No
mean
comments
to
coming.
didn't
No,
want to
no, that's
derail
all
the
right.
screen there, but
I've got it on the side there, but no comments coming in through yet. They should
Okay.
come through here as well. So,
all right, very good.
has anyone had to try this yet?
What struck me straight away is there's not too many tastings you go to where the first cab off the rank is over 60%.
No.
And yet this is not at all aggressive. So it's amazing how for something that's north of 60, it's remarkably tame. It's relatively youthful too, at only 8 years old. So when you see something that's 8 years old and something that's 60%, you're almost expecting something, at the risk of using the A word, slightly aggressive with some volatiles. And yet this does not display that at all. It's just wonderful. In fact, dare I say, it's bright and dazzling.
Well,
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, you can't argue with the name of this cask. The thing I just noticed off the palate of it, I get very incredibly obsessed with stone fruit during summer. Always have, always will. Especially nectarines. I think nectarines and peaches are one of the best things that we have as a natural resource. So on the palate straight away, it's just juicy, fresh nectarines, and just that sweet, juicy stone fruit kind of juice just softens that spirit from that 61%. So it makes it really palatable.
Very
While on the
peachy,
note-
yes. Fruity. Sorry, Lachlan, go ahead. Keep going.
Well, yes, there's that tinned peach thing you were saying on the nose, Adam. On the palate,
Yeah,
just fresh and fresh.
Yeah, the nose is just becoming like vanilla cream, like buns for me now, like sort of those custard buns.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Matt Bailey, for tuning in. I think from across the world, I believe.
Just a small distance.
Yeah,
It's 8 a.m. in the morning there. He should be at his desk work. He should be at his desk working hard. So I'm gonna, that's a strike. We'll let HR know.
Yeah. I'm basically HR for Australia branch, so I've already made a note about this. When Lachlan needs to call HR, my phone rings. So,
hey, you've brought up a really good photo there on the side, which is worth talking about. So what's unique about? And Lachlan, you touched on this, but this is a remarkable distillery. It's got a lot of different shapes and size stills. And gosh, when I first started actually writing about this distillery, they made 11 different types of single malt. I think these days they've whittled that down to just eight different ones. But this particular make, which we're the society call 112, has these quite unique stills here with what they call column heads, and they're not Lohmann stills, ironically, even though they're the same shape as them. But yeah, you compare that to, I guess, your more traditional distillery still and the neck. These are these column ones that in the old days would have had the rectifying plates in them. So you do get a very different spirit and character out of these as a result. That's one of the things that Loch Lomond. I've just mentioned the distillery. Well, not this particular maker, but anyway.
No, that's another code.
Yeah. It is another code, quite right. So the distillery that most people refer to as Loch Lomond Distillery, gosh, where was I going there? They were founded in the 1960s, 1965, and they were a self-sufficient blending house. So they've actually got a grain distillery right next door, which makes grain spirit. And then courtesy of, as I say, once upon a time, the 11 different malt whiskies they made here, they could basically make every style of blend under the one roof with all the different types of single malt spirits they were making and their grain. And this photo just shows you 4 of the malt stills. I'm now trying to recall whether they've got 6 or 8 in total, but anyway, that's
they've got 2. They've got 2 swan neck pots and 4 of those.
Right, 6 in total. Okay, yeah, and that's ignoring the stainless steel ones that we're not allowed to talk about, which
the
is
2 columns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the main difference that you find between Spirit 112 and 122. The codes that we have, 112 is meant to be a lighter, brighter spirit. So they've got that cooling ring at the top of their column that they really try and elevate that fruity, estery, bright spirit character. And it's something relatively similar to what we will see. Relatively similar, not the same at all, in the 128 that we'll see in a very short while. You know, that elevating, that fruity, that syrupy, that sweet, that bright. Mm-hmm.
I've just added a splash of water, and it hasn't hurt. It's elevated everything.
It was a little bit. I wouldn't call it a hot on the palate, but I'm not surprised that the water brings it to fruition, if you will.
I can just see Mark Teague and Tassie has joined. G'day, Mark. Good to see you.
His signature emoji, as well as Whiskey is my jam via YouTube. Welcome, Whiskey.
Actually, I just call that the Teague emoji. Doesn't everyone else? Isn't that what it's called?
It should be.
That's a lovely
brown spying on us.
I think another thing
I'm quite impressed with that one.
I'm very impressed, and I think also it's living proof of that old thing that a whiskey doesn't have to have double-digit figures in age to be impressive, and depending on when you started this journey of whiskey, that's actually quite a poignant thing to contemplate, because certainly 25 years ago, you hardly touched anything that was less than 10, and most distilleries didn't get out of bed for less than 12 with their flagship core range expression. And so certainly 25 years ago, you're almost conditioned to thinking, well, the whiskey had to be 12 years old to be any good. Anything less than that, it just wasn't worth your time. And this just shoots that well down, doesn't it? I mean, as an 8-year-old, this is stunning.
Absolutely. Well, and I think David Gilks has made a good point as well, in that on top of that, the young and sprightly flavor profile is often overlooked. And this just proves that it really shouldn't be. I mean, this is full flavored. It's young, but it's definitely full flavored. It's fantastic. Sorry, Lockie, you were about to say.
Oh no, I was just going to say that point you touched on there, Andrew, was very interesting, because I think we also forget the part that marketing played in people's perception of age in whiskey, right? Because if you look far enough back in single malt whiskey, most single malts were either no age or 8 years old at the top end.
Yeah.
And then slowly and slowly they got older and older to try and get people to drag people into it, basically, as a way to get people drinking whiskey again. And now we're going the other way to try and remind people that there are great whiskeys at a younger age.
Well, the other thing too is it ties in exactly to what you were just saying, but we also had the whiskey lock there in the late 80s, early 90s, where all of a sudden 20, 25, 30-year-old whiskey was very, very easy to get your hands on, and it was quite affordable and cheap. And so, when you could very easily afford an 18, 21, 25-year-old, 30-year-old, why would you go near something that was supposedly only 5 or 6 and no good,
No.
Yeah.
Dave Cook, are we going in order of the tasting notes? For the time being, yes. So the next round will be 35.331. Bear with us. Speaking of age, we're going to go the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Would you want to move on to the next one then?
Yeah, I reckon. Just
So
the thing with tonight's live stream is we have got 8 drams rather than our normal 5 to 6. So we're conscious of don't want to keep people here all night.
My camera's actually meant to refocus, but it ain't doing that. So yeah.
Mine's just you're gonna have to read it backwards.
Either that, or I did start too early, and
It looks pretty sharp when we look at it, Andrew. Maybe.
Oh, I guess it's just me then. You're right.
Oh well, I am so excited about this whiskey. The whole story behind these casks is so fun.
Well, you'll having said that, you'll now need to share it with everyone.
I intend to. Let's have a taste first. That's always the way to go, right?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Have a nose. This one is Premium Malt of the Month for November. So for those who don't know, November, for the last few years, we've been doing a Premium Malt of the Month as well as a Malt of the Month. Obviously, one's a premium black label livery bottle, and we've chosen 35.331 for this one. So it's single cask, first fill toasted hogshead, 27 years, full maturation, 55.7% ABV. And there it is there at Whiskey and Element.
Oh, that nose is cracking.
Yeah.
The note I always find on it, it's something you use a lot in woodworking, but people don't know a lot about it. But tongue nut oil, I always find on this series of casks. The closest relative it has is something like the Glenmorangie Aster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Paul Hamilton Brown assembled the 35 last night. Fantastic. Tastes its age. Oh, I don't know if I want to taste it. That nose is extraordinary.
It's one of those noses where you get stuck straight in it and it's already delivering and you're enjoying it, but you just know that over 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's just going to go in other directions as well.
Exactly. I get a little bit of that, like almost like if you'd sear off pineapple steaks, pineapple, like burning pineapple, even though there's no like smoke or anything, it's just this like cooking pineapple. Oh, I could spend days with this whiskey.
Part of me wants to say cinnamon on the nose, but I don't know if that's quite right. If it's like there's something else there, but it just reminds me of cinnamon.
It's definitely grated nutmeg, like freshly grated nutmeg.
That's probably a lot closer.
And specifically grated over a nice tapioca pudding.
Yeah. A bit of like chai tea as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
this
the
really
chai tea almost brings back the reference to cinnamon, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah.
Come full circle. Dove 35 is one of my favorite distilleries. That's fair enough. Bloody good. And they're very versatile as well.
You're not alone there, Dog.
Yeah. We see them in so many different flavor profiles.
Yeah. It's also a distillery that outside of independent bottlings, there's quite a devious or a deterring kind of ideology around it, where it is being created for a market that I guess doesn't really exist anymore. And so we have this weird concept of what this distillery represents. But when we see it in this fashion, it's absolutely exceptional, right? The story, I'll jump back into the story of these casks because I just cannot wait to tell it. This period of time when this was distilled, so this was distilled in 94 from memory. Was when
yes-ish. Hang on. Yeah.
Yep. This is when Dr. Bill Lumsden was treating this distillery as his sandbox for all the experimental stuff he was doing at Glenmorangie. These casks was him experimenting with the different forests around the United States to try and find the flavor profile he was looking for, air seasoning versus kiln drying for the timber, different toasting levels, different charring levels. These experiments inevitably became the Glenmorangie Artisan cask, and then after that, the Aster. But from memory, a lot of those casks from this distillery got purchased by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society pretty early doors because they weren't going to utilize them. And this is one of the, from what I have been told, one of the last remaining casks of that set that was purchased.
Yeah, that's
There you
all amazing, and you're right. I mean, this was the genesis of what most of us came to know as Astar. It's probably also just worth doubling back there. Glenmorangie has been around for a very, very long time. Glenmorangie actually bought this distillery back in 1920, which gives you some clue.
Yeah.
And people often ask, well, how come Glenmorangie has such a late code in the society system? I think Glenmorangie is 125 from memory.
It is, yeah.
And people ask, why is it so late? And I'll share something with you that isn't talked about too loudly. But there are a couple of reasons why it 125 came onto the scene so late in the piece. First of all, primarily casks just weren't passing our tasting panel in Scotland, because at that time Glenmorangie was primarily in the game of blending. They did have a single malt. It was the biggest selling single malt in Scotland because it was also the most affordable single malt in Scotland. And the panel would regularly get all these casks of 125. Sorry, Glenmorangie at that time, and they just wouldn't pass panel. And it wasn't until they got to the casks that we're talking about here, where by that stage Bill had almost tripped on this, not tripped, but had discovered the secret of these air season casks that were air seasoned for 2 years instead of kiln dried, first fill, all those processes, lightly toasted, heavily toasted, lightly charred. That he struck that winning formula that became Astar, and they were the very same casks that the society finally said, this is great, this is what we've been looking for all this time. And so that's why it's late in the piece.
Yeah,
that's all a bit of a strange excursion, given that we're actually talking about 35 here. But it comes back to what you're saying. You use the word
that's
sandbox.
this cask.
The phrase I always used to use was this distillery was Bill's playground. And he would play an experiment here, and what worked, he would then take across to Glenmorangie.
Yeah.
It's the same with
palate.
sorry.
So I was going to say, like, I had a taste before, and like the palate is just extraordinary. Like uncooked cookie dough. And now on the nose, I'm getting like that sort of saffron spices, and more of that nutmeg is coming through. This is an incredible one. I think Betty Petrie had some notes, caramel, yes, chai tea, and David Gilks had a good note as well, which was furniture polish.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that tongue oil. That's a classic furniture polish.
Yeah.
Seasoning. Yeah, and tons of like Brazil nut, that almost like the fattiness of hazelnut, but the bitterness of walnut skins,
Yeah.
It's sounding very familiar.
I have spent some time with this whiskey today.
It's honestly, I mean, I was just saying to both of you earlier, the Peat Plants Distillery 4 was probably my pick for an end of year bottle for myself. This, coming back to this, it's got competition, I must say, because this is, and I find it interesting. Like I often, you'll have a whiskey and then you'll go back to it a few days later or a couple of weeks later. I think it's the first time I've had a few whiskeys and then gone back to the same ones just a few hours later, and a lot of them have changed a lot for me.
See, this one here for me has like a dark chocolate and strawberry jam kind of ripple ice cream kind of thing going for it.
Just
as well.
A fantastic note.
Yeah, can't argue with you. Bang on.
It just keeps evolving. We could spend the entire hour and a half on this whiskey.
Well, do you know what? It's actually that's probably a really good point. If people can be disciplined, it's probably worth just leaving a bit in your glass. Let's stick it to one side. We'll move on and come back to this in 20 minutes time and just see how it's changed.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Which, by the way, if you can be disciplined, is a good thing to do at any society event. If you ever come to one of our events at a venue, always leave a little bit behind and come back and visit it later on. It's amazing where whiskies can turn to, particularly, society bottlings at cask strength.
it challenges your brain a little bit in what you've had just previously before it, right? So we set these lineups in a way to try and not make it confronting for your palate, but doesn't mean it's the right way or the wrong way to do it. You can always come back and challenge yourself in a new way, and you'll find something different. You'll find out more about
Absolutely.
the drop itself and your own palate.
And everyone's palate is different, so it's worth trying that.
hmm
Matt Bailey, also cracking value for a 27-year-old single cask. Yep, so that's $5.99 a bottle, which was down from $6.99. And if you are interested, you can scan the QR code right there, or visit our website. All this information can be found in November Our Turn, brought to you by Scotch Malt Whisky Society Australia.
So I was thinking for the next dram, and to the point that Andrew made just before we jumped on, we might swap the order a little bit. I think going the Delightfully Bonkers before the banana ice cream smoothie might be a smart idea.
Yeah, let's do it. So for those playing along at home, which will be everyone except us, cask 128.20, which I'll hold up right there. Delightfully Bonkers, we will be tasting next. So 8-year-old sweet, fruity, and mellow. And I mean, I remember when we tasted this for the first time, Lockie, about a month ago, peaches note in it that we've come to love in like the millions of peaches or the mad as a box of frogs, and this lives up to the hype.
The electrochemistry as well. This spirit always has that tin stone fruit, it's like the syrup from the tin stone fruit thing on the nose, on the palate, regardless of cask, it's there. And that is just exceptional to see. Yeah, straight away.
There we go. Oh, yeah. Wow.
I was just focusing on something else when you were talking about it. Sorry, so I only had one ear listening in, but did someone say tin peaches?
Yeah, I think we both did Tinder SPC peaches.
I think I'm getting more of the tin than the peach at the moment, but that might change.
Yeah, there is a touch of like an industrial, almost like you know those sheet metal cutting machines, you know?
Yeah, sheet metal machinery sort of thing.
Yeah. Like they just
A
the
metallic
smell
note.
smell of hot aluminium.
Well, Matt Bailey, one of our members from Scotland, has just mentioned Blue Powerade.
Well, that's the story for
which
another
isn't
time.
a bad one, actually.
No, it's in reference to electrochemistry. I know exactly why.
The cocktail.
Yeah.
Adam, who is behind your couch? Oh, that's Matt Bailey. That's our director from afar.
He's he's far behind.
He watches over us. I think he creeps out Andrew a little bit. Micro Bailey.
I'm disappointed in my background. I can see a few electric guitars at the back of Lockie's there, and there's a bass guitar. I'm gonna have to bring my guitar collection for the next live stream. Sorry.
Yeah. Slowly assimilating everyone.
Well, yeah, I just moved our room around today, so to have the bottles and the guitars in the background.
Yeah, I didn't even notice them before, Lockie. Good form.
Mm.
Dave Cook, are you talking about the guitars, Micro Bailey, or this exceptional 8-year-old dram? Because all of them you should love. I mean, really.
Well, if I can, since we're amongst friends, if I can be frank and candid, I have never enjoyed a 128.
Fair enough.
Ever. In fact, and I remember when 128.1.2.3.4 all came into this country, and they were a hard slog at the time. And we would send them out to all the states as per our tasting program back then at the time. And they didn't exactly take off. And it was a very different, confronting sort of flavor. And I've obviously had many of the society ones over that time and haven't really gelled with it. This is the first one where I'm actually enjoying it. This is a nice drop.
So I will add to that, Andrew. I agree. So some of the early ones I had, a lot of the core bottlings and independent bottlings, and then also the this bottlings by the SMWS, I really struggled with in the early days. And I mentioned the cask electrochemistry, which is 128.9, a couple of times already. That was probably the first time I tasted a bottling from this distillery where I went, okay, I'm starting to understand what's happening. And then after that, I did a bit of research into the distillery to find out how the spirit tasted the way it did, why it did. And it still took me a couple of extra bottlings to wrap my head around it fully.
Drum roll.
So this distillery in Wales has their, what do they call it? The Faraday still.
Faraday.
Yeah, named after Dr. David Faraday, the guy who designed the still, which basically took multiple styles of distillation and kind of brought them together. So it's a batch operation running from a pot into two separate columns. So it's almost similar to a American style distillation rather than a UK style distillation, but slightly in between, designed to retain a lot of the highly fruity esters of fermentation, but also a really syrupy texture, which is really hard to do at the high ABVs they're pulling it off at. So it's a weird kind of setup that they've got. It took me a long time to really wrap my head around why this spirit can be so good, especially when they were bringing in some of the worst stuff from the distiller. Well, what I was tasting was not that great. And it wasn't until 128.9 that I really started to gain an affection for the distillery. And everything we've had since that has come through since has been brilliant. Mad as a Box of Frogs that Adam mentioned is particularly one of my favorites, which just genuinely tasted like a bag of mixed colored Allen's frogs.
Which is ironic because that was the first 128 I tasted, and I didn't think much of it. And then millions of peaches came along, and I loved it. And I've got a bottle of it. But I mean,
I'm getting the bag of mixed frogs, mixed jelly, jubes, whatever, fruit tingles, whatever you want to call it. There's just loads of it in this. But
the Allen snakes for me, the green snake specifically.
I agree. And what I was going to say earlier, the other thing too is this is from a first fill ex-bourbon cask. A lot of the early society bottlings from this distillery were, I guess you'd call them non-standard. I mean, the first few we had in were Madeira casks, and the Madeira casks were really challenging. Then they moved on to port for a bit. So it was a long time till we actually had something in a bourbon barrel that I guess allowed more of the spirit to shine more than the oak.
Yeah. And look, especially when they're making spirit in this fashion, it is really hard to not lose that spirit against timber, right? Because they're distilling up to 90-something% and then diluting it down, but it's still a pretty light, delicate spirit. And that spirit's still going to extract so much flavor out of the timber, especially if you're using brand new casks or wine casks or whatever you're using. You're going to pull all that flavor out and just mask all the work you've done beforehand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame that was what happened, but look at what can happen now.
Andrew, thanks for joining us. Not you, Derbidge, Andrew Moat.
Bye. Yeah.
But also, thanks for joining us. He's gone. Lucky it's you and me. So we've just been tasting Cask 128.20, Delightfully Bonkers, and we're going in a reverse order-ish. So I think we're moving on to 63.104 next as well.
We are, yes.
Just before we do,
go on.
My camera went black there for a moment for no other reason that I just didn't think everyone probably wanted to see me take a swig of that. But
it was perfectly timed with my comment.
What a Boilermaker that made! I have to say, for anyone who likes their Boilermakers, that Delightfully Bonkers and a pale ale just works an absolute treat. So there's a tip for you.
Lockie, I can see you're itching. Go on.
Oh, I was about to say, which I'm pretty sure you would have said the same thing. When Adam was talking about how we first tasted it, it was actually my first day working with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. It was that Wednesday.
The 6th of November. Yeah. And we went to the bar at Whiskey and Element and made our own Boilermaker with a beer from Co-Conspirators Brewing. their sour matriarch that they did for their birthday this year, which was a sour pale ale, sour IPA, sorry, with peach and pineapple and orange in it, and it was just perfect.
Yeah, wow.
Nice. Before we move on to the next dram, just want to quickly do a shameless little plug. We are currently having our last drops sale, which is we only run twice a year, mid-year, end of year. So this one ends at midnight on Sunday, or for those of you who are a bit particular, 11:59 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Times. About 40 different casks, slightly reduced, including a bottle that we had an over allocation of accidentally, 33-year-old 24 to 169, which we've got for half price. So if you want something ultra special or just something fun, last drops. And as a bonus, if you spend $400 or more, use the code LASTSHIP25 for complimentary shipping.
33-year-old 124. That's worth crossing town for.
24. Sorry,
what did I say?
124.
That was a dumb thing to say then. 24, I mean.
Don't get people too excited.
All right, should we move on to the 63?
Yeah. I'm already on it, and it's, boy, this is going to be special.
This was one of my favorite picks from the outturn it came out in, which I think might have been an October one. Because it was just glorious. Dave Cook, I don't want to know. I bought 3.330 on our 10-day and now dropped a heap. Apologies, Dave. FOMO does strike again.
This is such an underrated distillery, mostly because it's so pretty much unknown. You don't see it in too many forms, but we featured this at one of the very earliest, actually the first. There you go. I'll go back that far. 2002, we featured this at the launch events, and no one had ever heard of it. And if you saw it written down, no one could pronounce it. But it was a brilliant drop, and it doesn't make too many appearances on outturn, but when it does, it's always a treat. And to see one of this age as well, with 20 years under its belt, is a real treat.
That's first fill bourbon, 59.6%. Just, I'm definitely getting the banana smoothie.
Yeah.
With like malt vanilla shake.
Yeah, the malt vanilla milkshake, but specifically like the underripe, kind of almost slightly chalky bananas, you know, or even like plantains. Even
I was about to say plantain. Yeah.
I find that a bit more than say that really dense kind of classic banana flavor. Yeah.
You don't see too many first fill bourbon casks aged through to 20, do you? Like they tend to get tipped at sort of 10, 12, and it's the refills that then seem to go through to this age. So to have a first fill 20-year-old is quite unique.
You're seeing more. You're seeing more and more, I think, because people are starting to realize that the value that they can have.
The only real code I know of that we see first fills go through to this age, or around this age, are 19s. Those 18 and 19-year-olds tend to be first fills as well.
Yes,
this is quite syrupy on the palate.
Yeah,
for such a thick nose, like a thick shake sort of nose. It's got a remarkably a thin and syrupy palate.
Now, yeah, it's got. You keep saying like smoothie as well, and we keep talking about milkshakes and smoothies. This is like that frozen banana chunk and mixed berry smoothie all the way through on the palate.
Yeah. Betty
But
Petrie,
like
this
those,
one is
like,
moreish too.
Yeah. Slight bit of freezer burn.
Freezer burn, yeah.
You know what? It's not as silly as it sounds because I can get that on the palate, that freezer burn, even though
And
it's
that's
not
where,
cold at all.
yeah, it's got the taste of like freezer burnt mixed berries. That's where,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dave Cook, not many appearances, even though it's up to 104. I mean, it's up to
Yeah, but
104 in 40 years.
to be
plus.
fair, not many of them came to Australia.
Yeah.
There you go.
What I love
Do you
about
remember?
sorry, you go.
Sorry, I was going to say, do you remember the earliest instance of a 63 in Australia, Branch?
Well, it was at the launch events in 2002.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Um,
you said that, of course.
if you excuse me for 5 minutes, I can run up and actually find exactly what code it was, but well, might say that for another day. But what I like, by the way, I can tell you now, it was in the teens, 63.19 or 18, something like that.
Yeah, right.
But what I love about this distillery that, again, isn't sort of widely spoken of, this distillery is owned by the Shivers Group. And if you go up the tree, Shivers is owned by Pernod Ricard. But Shivers owned 13 malt whiskey distilleries. And anyone who's been to Scotland and visited any of those 13 will know that the Shivers distilleries are, I'll use the word notorious, it's the wrong word, but they're notoriously automated. If you've got visions of walking into a distillery and seeing a beautiful, old-fashioned, Stillman doing everything in the old-fashioned way, you're not going to see that at the Shivers distilleries. They are remarkably automated. Even the switching from the four shots to the middle cut is done by density meter and a computer. So there's just one guy who sits at a console and does everything. Very, very high-tech, automated production. And that's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just is. It's how they choose to make whiskey. The thing is, some days the computers don't work, and sometimes you've got to go back to the old-fashioned manual ways. And this distillery, number 63, is the one distillery out of 13 in the group where they send all their production staff to learn the tools of the trade and to do it by hand. So before you can work at any of the other 12 distilleries, you've got to spend a stint at this distillery learning the old-fashioned ways, because it's the last and the only one that still actually does it that way. And I don't know, for me, that's just something that I like. I like the romance of that. And 20 years later, I like the taste of it too.
It's hard to find romance in a lot of, I guess, what you would call a workhorse distillery, right? Because let's be honest, it's still an industry at the day, and it was heavily industrialized for the last 200 years, and increasingly more and more and more. So trying to find that romance where it's touch and feel is really, really hard to see, especially around Scotland.
I agree, and I warn people before they head to Scotland on their pilgrimage. You got to remember, these places are industrial facilities for producing alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can visit them and walk through and take a couple of photos and taste is kind of a bonus, really.
Yeah, and they didn't do that for a long time. They're only a lot of them are only starting to do it now.
Yeah,
I was going to say a lot you still can't, from my understanding. So
yeah,
very true.
So to put in perspective, right? We talked about 112 earlier on, a distillery in Dumbarton, which is such an odd distillery. They make. When I was there in 2019, they told me they make 13 styles of whiskey. That's been reduced now. Not just malt whiskey at that point as well. That was across 20 million liters of spirit.
Yeah.
Right? It's a factory. It's not pretty. It's not romantic. It's a factory. And the people who are working there, they're factory workers. They're not.
Yeah.
All the imagery we see of people who are working in distilleries, rolling cast elegantly through a field or whatever. That's not how it works.
Smiling up at the camera. Well, I mean, there's the Glen something distillery there. Just don't look at the top of the image. It's as you said, it's industrial. It's not meant to look pretty. I mean, it's Scotland, so it still looks kind of pretty, but
it's meant to be functional.
Exactly.
And
exactly right.
to your point, Lockie, about 112 making 18 million liters a year, and that obviously includes their grain content. But to put that in context, some of the really well-known distilleries are a fraction of that. I mean, Ardbeg is currently at 2.4 million, having just gone through an expansion. So
They just doubled it.
Yes. So it gives you some insight, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's such a funny thing because this distillery would be making, off the top of my head, around 3 to 4 million liters a year.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
Yeah, just off the top of my head. And everything we've tasted so far, with the exception of 112, is less than that. So,
for what it's worth, only because I had the resource handy, this distillery has a capacity of 4.2 at the moment. So
I was pretty close.
you were pretty friggin' close.
Not bad.
We'll pay that.
David Gilks, all of this batch of 6.3 casks from '02 has been great. Really enjoying this one, but fascinating to try these 19, 20-year-old first fills from May 2002 and see the similarities and differences.
I'm actually going to go back to a point that was made before. So only it's cask 104, even though we've seen very few of them in Australia. I've got a resource here that Adam and I was sent last week or the week before by someone that we know in the UK. 63.3 was released in 1991.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so 1991, 63.3. You said early to mid teens for yourself there in 2002, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge disparity.
Yeah, and the society does ebb and flow with its availability of stock from certain distilleries. When I first came in contact with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, we were having 33s coming through all the time. When's the last time we saw one of those? Or
Yeah.
6 in 1 year. So it's just, it does ebb and flow, and what comes available does happen to change as well. So
Of
we will
course.
see an absolute smattering of them or completely nothing.
I've told the story at events in Sydney, so any Sydney viewers have heard the story before, but I did actually get some complaints from a couple of members 8, 9, 10 years ago, where they were complaining that we were seeing too many threes. Every outturn, there was a 3 on it. And then those same people then whinged at me 5, 6 years later when we had no 3s for a while. And I'm thinking, well, come on, like, choose your side, dude.
Yeah, I had
well,
the
look,
same.
Sorry, go on, Lockie.
I had the exact same complaint from some customers when I was working at Whisky and Element when I probably around 2016. I reckon 2016, 2017. Oh, there's a 3 every month. I can't stand it. I'm over it. Those 3s are highly sought after now. Those ones that were released back then.
Yeah.
And there was that period. There was nothing. Not much we can do about it. It just happens.
Yeah, I'd say we just saw a 3 and it disappeared on our turn day in November. So please accept our apologies for both selling out, and that was the name of the whiskey. So, but who knows what a 2025 will hold.
Dave Cooks just put up a comment. I would love to see a distillery 1, 2, 3. Dave, I'm with you. One of my favorite ever whiskeys from the society was called a Strawberry Ballerina, which was an early 1, 2, 3, and that's been a highlight. So I'm looking forward to seeing them come back as well. All right, forgive me. What are we moving on to?
39.207. 307.
That one
207.
No, 207. Yeah.
I was reading the
too big for your britches already. Jesus.
No, I was reading your menu.
Yeah, that makes sense actually.
And your tasting sheet.
Well, yeah, there you go.
It's a big W.
So this one's part of our. I can't even open mine. Jesus. This one's part of our winter series, which you'll see if you look outside your window. So the SMWS bottlings, we'll be receiving 3 here in Australia. And this one was December Malt of the Month. Again, sold out, unfortunately. It's a 12-year-old full maturation, spicy and dry.
It's very rare you see this distillery code in the spicy and dry category, I believe.
Yes, yeah, very true.
It mostly sits in the juicy oak and vanilla, the sweet fruity and mellow. Very rarely in the young and sprightly, but
I mean, it's a
and it,
distillery that's famed for its fruity new make. So
yeah.
yeah.
But we've also been seeing a lot of spirit from this distillery across the board, not just within the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, but in independent bottlers globally within the last 12 months. And I noticed that quite heavily. I was saying to the team at Whiskey and Element today, I have seen probably the most spirit from this distillery that I have seen in the 10 years I've been in this industry this year.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, right.
Last year it was Bunnahabhain Stoisha. There was just tons of that stuff getting around, and this year it was this distillery.
so interestingly, and Adam's probably heard me say this before, but if you joined the society between 2002 and 2006 or 7, there or thereabouts, you got a bottle of 39 as your joining whiskey. So back then, at the time when you joined, you paid a join-up fee, and as part of that fee, you were given a 700 ml bottling, and 39 was the membership bottling there for a long time. So I've still got my 39 from 2002, and I've never opened it because it's a very special bottle to me.
Yeah,
For a special moment.
For a special moment, yeah.
Yeah. The precursor to the malt of
there's
the
a
month.
generation of society members who were introduced to the society courtesy of the 39, basically.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say
maybe
to
a bottling
avoid
to welcome in.
avoid confusion, this one is 39.307. So this label, which came from the UK, is actually wrong. Just to avoid any confusion with people looking on the website.
So I was right the first time.
Yeah, because I was right. So spicy liquid. Paul Hamilton Brand, you're not wrong. Paul Rocket, 123 is a unicorn. 123.8 was the first port pipe I'd bought of any description. Horizon opener of a dram.
Good to have you along, Paul. Haven't seen you for a while. Hope you've been well, mate.
Betty Petrie, a bit sweet for me.
Oh, Betty, please
Yeah,
expand on that.
taste
So
it.
do you find this sweeter than, say, some of the preceding drams? Because obviously in the spicy and dry category, you'd expect a dry thing. So if you're finding it sweet, how did you find the preceding drams that, well, to my palate at least, were a bit sweeter? We'll give it time to type a response there, but
Yeah. How's the Boilermaker pairing, Andrew?
oh, good question. All right, good, yeah, good question.
I assume, has your camera gone black on purpose, or?
No, you've just switched me off.
No, it's.
Okay,
Let me reset you.
What's going on here?
No, it seems to be. There's like a little bit of green I can see on the. There we go.
Amazingly, it somehow switched from my webcam to my back of the computer cam. So there you go.
Okay, should have had an SMWS bottle there.
Should we do that again for the camera? Boilermaker?
That's what I should have done. I should have orchestrated a beer for myself.
Oh, I have to say the Boilermaker with 128 was vastly superior.
I just think it's a great whiskey to be pairing anyway, because it's got that texture that can hold up to a bit of like clean astringency that you can find on a lot of beer as well, especially nowadays.
For anyone who's a fan of the Johnny Walker Green Label range, when Green Label was launched in Australia, and I hasten to add, it was actually launched through the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, would you believe? Now, that's a story for another day.
Interesting.
Green Label was, this distillery was the heart of Green Label. So they used to make quite a point at the time that, Klein Leash was the heart of Gold Label, and Distillery 39 was the heart of Green Label at that time. But anyway.
It's now Cragganmore, I believe, is the heart of Green Label as well.
Yeah, well, bear in mind that there's about 7 different variants of Green Label these days, isn't there?
Yeah.
Betty's come back to you, Andrew. The others were Moorish, you see.
Yeah, well, you can't argue with that, can you?
No. David Gilks, this feels more like a caramel sweet than the fruity sweet of some of the preceding drams. Definitely not my favorite so far, but could see this having its time and place. Well, as we mentioned earlier, maybe worth keeping it in the glass, a little bit in the glass to see how it changes.
That's
I
a great
find a lot
photo
of
to bring up on screen there, Adam. Sadly, none of that is actually working. So this distillery has had quite a few facelifts and upgrades, and there's actually none of the original building that's still in use. So that's the old kilns, which are just there for decoration. Everything
That's a
else is
shame.
now in a far more modern facility.
well,
This looks better, no doubt.
Absolutely. As I say, you picked the Instagram shot. Well done. That was exactly the
Yeah.
one to play
Thank
for.
you.
it brings us back to the romance of the Scotch whisky industry, even though it's an industry, you know.
Yeah.
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 But I guess but by that same token, I mean, a building like that was functional, not romantic, back when it was
Yeah.
built and used for that.
even the pagoda roof, which
Aspects
looks so
change.
pretty. Yeah, it's not that the pagoda roofs aren't functional anymore, but they definitely were at one point in time.
Yeah,
and
I
they were
mean, at
just
the time, they probably didn't think it was as romantic.
That's a worthwhile story now that you've mentioned it, but you can see there, we know from this picture that in fact, this distillery, I almost said it, was a very lightly peated whiskey back in the day. And you can tell by the inclination there of the pagoda, it's quite steep. And so the smoke would be able to rise and get up quite quickly. For the distilleries
funnel out really fast.
For the distilleries trying to make a more heavily peated malt, that would be a much shallower inclination, if you like, to keep the smoke in the kiln for a bit longer. Gee, we're learning something tonight, aren't we?
I know. Would you consider that link?
All right, we're getting to that point, are we?
Thank you. All right.
Are you qualified to tell dad jokes? Is that
Not yet?
okay?
I'm training. I'm training at the moment.
Dadum.
Never thought that nickname would make it to a live stream, but here we are.
I can see the Gaucho Espinosa has joined us. G'day, Alex. Good to see you, mate, as always.
Good evening, Alejandro. And Matt Bailey. The romance. Every distillery has the clearest pure water source. Remember, that's true. That's actually certified knowledge.
That's what the industry is built upon.
They love the cap and matching vest combo. Very smart.
But I got to. This man sets the tone. Whatever Alex wears, you got to one up him. So
Oh well. As for people feeling this whiskey not either too sweet or just not their favorite so far, we have had such juicy whiskey so far, right? And it is quite dry, chestnuts, and I get Scottish oatcakes. That's really dry, biscuity.
yeah,
Cracked black pepper. Like it's dry, it's biscuity, it's
And that was for the benefit of the viewers at home. That was the conversation we were having off air before we started. Was where do you put this particular one? This could move forward. It could move back. It's it is where it is tonight. But it'd be interesting to I wonder what people's perceptions might have been had it been a bit earlier or elsewhere in the mix.
I think definitely a good call. Changing the lineup on the fly for this one.
Yeah, putting that 63 and the 128, swapping those around was a good idea.
Unfortunately, this dram did sell out within a few days of release for December outturn, so not available to purchase tonight. But it's in our hearts and maybe still in your glass.
It's in our
also,
hearts,
if you're in Melbourne, it's on the bar of Whiskey and Element.
It's in our hearts and rapidly moving through to our livers.
I just added a bunch of water to it, and it becomes a little bit sweeter. It drops that spiciness down, and it becomes very much orange oil. Like creamy orange oil.
Creamy orange oil's not a bad.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a transformation.
Yeah, and the biscuity character is still there because it's always going to be with this distillery.
You know what? That's actually not that it needed much improving, but it has improved. That's improved out of sight.
Lachlan, you've got your homework cut out for you.
I do, yes, and it is sitting right next to me in my cupboard, just over here to the right, which I
Dessert from a Dov's soaked SMWS Christmas cake. It's a yearly tradition.
It's part of the thing I was going to bring in on Friday for our workday, Adam.
Yes, our end of year staff drinks with the whole team.
Yes,
Me and you.
yeah.
Yours will be more exciting than my staff drinks, mate.
Thought that was just before the stream.
Cut. Very
but
good. Well played.
That orange note. Sorry, Andrew, go on.
Oh, look, something that's been lost in the society over time for a whole stack of reasons we won't go into, but we used to, in Australia, we used to have local tasting panel notes, and we would actually write stuff else. And if this was going into our turn, the very last line would have said, "Add water to this; it improved." It's a shame we've lost that over the years. But I would love to say to people, if you buy a bottle of this, buy a bottle of nice water to go with it as well, because for me that's just a totally different dram. Having added a splash to it.
How cool is that? How cool is that creamy orange thing? It's like orange creaming soda now. It's
yeah.
So what's your water of choice, Andrew? If you had to recommend a nice water.
Oh well, if it's available and I've got the cash, Fiji water works very well.
Water, okay.
But
Heard it here first, folks.
Bogan, I'll just go for Mount Franklin if I can get my hands on it. So.
There's nothing wrong with MF, you know.
That's extraordinary. And do you know what? To your orange note, it's almost taking on a Cointreau note.
Oof.
Yeah, that bitter orange. That triple sec almost.
Yeah.
And Kinotto, Kinotto oranges.
Oh man, I'm loving that.
Speaking of origins, that's not a bad segue into Merry Christmas.
You are correct.
Not bad.
I
David
actually
Cook,
think we
non-sparkling.
If we are going to change the order up once, might as well do it twice. I reckon doing the 55 first will be a smarter way to go about it.
That's a good call, especially after today's experimentation.
Yeah,
with
I think
whiskey,
that 55. So that can also be a good segue from the oranges as well.
And when we say 55, we do mean 55.76 petals in an orange bitters cocktail, as seen on Lachlan Watt's screen, National Ambassador of SMWS Australia, and from afar, Andrew's screen really sharply.
I did actually change the focus to auto, but that's clearly not working, is it? No. All right. Nice color, I have to say. I'm old school. I still judge a whiskey by its color, and I know you should never do that, but
look, it's sometimes pretty hard to avoid it as well. And what I've always told people is color can tell you some things, but a lot of the things it can tell you are not relevant. Unless it's fluoro green, you're pretty safe. And
I missed the first half of that. Are you talking about radioactive waste or something?
Color of whiskey.
Okay,
yeah. But it is a tough thing to avoid because you're still sitting there and looking at it, right? And you're sitting there and playing around with it and swirling it, and it's a hard thing to avoid. But it is a beautiful color, and that note that it's just in the name, orange bitters cocktail, is really indicative of the color of the whiskey itself.
Very good, Andrew. Very good.
It
is.
Did Bailey's comment make it on screen then?
Briefly, I feel like that's your better position.
For all the structural engineers watching, yes.
Did you send them the live stream link?
I was about to make a crude and lewd comment, which I won't. But well played, Matt. I'll leave it at that. He would have done some research to look up AS 1379. By the way, that's
Well,
Yeah.
well, again,
haven't actually heard
he's
that in
clearly
years.
not working. So you know,
clearly not. Must be a quiet day in Edinburgh today.
It looks like he's already on the booze at 9 a.m.
yeah, 9:05. He's going for it.
Yeah, on the tins.
I'm
David
enjoying the
Gilks.
nose of this, gentlemen.
The nose was probably my favorite nose of November Our Turn, I must say. Like especially after tasting it today again, it's just incredible. David Gilks, don't think I've had a whiskey as strong on the chestnut notes as this. Chestnut cream, a little herbal, floral, and then the orange.
Is there such a thing as chestnut cream? I mean, now that you say it, I can imagine a creamy, chestnutty sort of flavor. But is there such a beast in real life?
Yes, I
Lachlan?
would say so. I mean, it'd be seasonal for sure. I can't say I've ever had it.
You haven't
I
had
can imagine
chestnut
it,
cream?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of nut creams, but not chestnut.
Oh, thanks, folks. This tasting note reminds me a lot of an orange filo cake I had on the weekend at a restaurant. Just like filo cake with orange syrup. A potocalopita, if you will. Just a divine nose.
I also, when I tasted this earlier in the afternoon, I found this specific orange and poppy seed friand that this cafe I used to work at had all the time. By the end of working at that cafe, I couldn't stand the thing, but it's it's incredibly nostalgic for me to go back to that.
David Gilks reckons in France there is a chestnut cream.
That would probably be the only location you could find it.
Betty, I agree. Lychees for sure. There's a lovely
thin lychee. I entirely agree.
It's almost it's got the tartness of a not a quite ripe lychee.
There's also a white cranberry note or a white white berry, not cranberry. What am I thinking of?
It's probably worth talking a bit about this whiskey. So it spent 12 years in an ex-bourbon hogshead, which is industry term for a refill that's been filled so many times we actually lost count. So it doesn't matter whether it's 2, 3, or 4. And then it got refilled into a first fill Oloroso
Spanish oak, yeah.
And so it's obviously it's a 15-year-old with a 3-year-old sherry finish, basically. And for
extra maturation.
Those who I don't know if it's on the market anymore. I think it got withdrawn or it changed, got a different name. But Balvenie used to put out one called Doublewood, the Balvenie Doublewood, and that was a late finish in sherry. And this whiskey reminds me of that. And that was a great Balvenie, by the way.
The Balvenie Doublewood 12-year-old was, the first kind of proper foray into that. Well, that's what they claim, at least. And yeah, it was 10 and 2, right? That was what it was.
Yeah,
10 years in bourbon, and then 2 years in these Oloroso sherry casks. And this here is 12 and 3, right? So it's not too far off that mark, and especially for spirit style. This distillery, look, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not a distillery I've typically reached for a lot of times. It's a distillery I find that sits in there is great whiskey out there on the market from this distillery, but it's not something that hits every single time. But this one here, like I said, that friand note, that bready kind of biscuity, that phyllo pastry kind of brings it back into line with what I want to see in whiskey, regardless. And I think it's just spent the right amount of time in that Oloroso sherry to give it a bit more unctuous, nutty, savory kind of character.
Yeah. There's another private whiskey club in Australia that bottled a cask of this quite recently, in fact, at 55%. And it's always had quite a fruity spirit. And that particular bottling was amazing. And this one for me, even though it's got the sherry cask influence, just maintains that fruit and that depth and that complexity. I'm really enjoying it. Where I was heading with that, Lockie, if you've not had too many 55s that have pushed your buttons, come to Sydney. I might be able to help you.
All right. Okay. Well, I will definitely be up there shortly.
I think there's a 555 planned for next year.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I've got a little picture of Distillery 55 over there. Nice little scenic picture again. Right
Just
over there.
out of interest, is that something you lifted off one of my things, or is that just another Google shot?
It's a Google shot. I don't believe I saw Whiskey and Wisdom in the.
That's okay. I've taken that exact shot with the ducks in exactly the same position. So I was just wondering.
I can't be 100% sure, but I think I would have definitely noticed Whiskey and Wisdom in the URL. So
no trouble.
But good work if it was. I mean, it's a great shot.
Oh man, this nose keeps on giving. It's one of those. I love a whiskey where the nose is impressive, and you have a sip, and you get all the stuff on the palate, and then because you've had a sip, you go back to the nose, and the nose has changed and it's developed, and that normally happens for 1 or 2 iterations. This for me is 3 or 4 iterations. With each sip, you go back to the nose, and there's something else there again. It just develops and develops.
Well, one thing I found on this is so it's something you see quite a bit in the cocktail kind of scene. And it's a kind of bitters which comes from England, which is a dandelion and burdock root bitters. And they also, I believe they make I'm actually having a look at it now, if they do, a dandelion and burdock soda over there. Fentimans does, which is similar to like Fever Tree soda or whatever. They make a dandelion and burdock soda, but it's this common cocktail kind of thing, floral and dark and dense. And I get tons of that on this.
Right. Yeah.
David Cook, something.jpg again. That's right.
Is that a Family Guy reference? If that's a Family Guy reference, then well played.
Yeah.
Something. Dark Side.
I've seen this Bomberman chestnut cream. My a friend of my partner, my wife and I, they gave us a advent calendar, but it's all the Bomberman spreads, and it's got all these fun flavored jams and spreads. So
that's one you were telling me about.
We haven't come across the chestnut cream yet. But there's been things like pear and cacao, which I'm so excited to try.
Yeah, wow.
If you haven't yet, ladies and gentlemen, send in your chestnut cream sightings so we can find out more. That was Paul Hamilton Brown with the Bon Maman. So we've had 3 so far. Let's get that to 5.
You know what? What I'm enjoying about this whiskey also is it's obviously got sherry influence, and yet it's not screaming Oloroso at you. It's a beautiful whiskey where it's got a flavor profile, it's got a character, and it's been melded and shaped by sherry rather than being the sherry.
That's also kind of why I wanted to move this a bit earlier, because also this distillery spirit is quite light, but it's just a great example of a beautiful, harmonious balance of of sherry and the spirit, right?
Yeah.
They've taken this out at the exact right moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Where the sherry's done its job, but it doesn't feel tacked on either. It's not just whiskey with a bit of sherry added onto it.
Yeah. And well played to Ewan in the UK for plucking this out at 12 years old and deciding to put it into a Oloroso cask,
Absolutely. On that note, should we move on to the long-awaited Merry Christmas?
We shall.
looks like we've lost Adam, even though he's still ticking away at everything.
We're still live, so the show must go on.
It does.
And again, just to my point earlier, if you judge a whiskey by its colour, I'm already enjoying this.
Look, this looks like a sherry whiskey, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yes,
it looks the part, and this is again a distillery which a lot of people don't see a lot. Or I mean, this is the 33rd cask from this distillery that the society has seen, and it's a distillery that I absolutely love. From their peated to their unpeated, I have a little bit of a celebration that I do every year, and for the last few years, it's always been the last 5 years, I'd say. It's always been a SMWS bottling that I've picked that I do Christmas highballs with. So I just start drinking highballs, and that's what I do all day. I love it. Absolutely love it. And last year was 115. It was the Esther Jester, Capering Esther Jester. And that was a phenomenal whiskey for highballs.
So your tradition is that you drink every year?
Yes.
Very good. Make it society.
But holy heck, what a nose on this, hey?
I mean, just on the color thing, I feel like if you are going to pick a correlation between them, the color definitely represents what the nose you'd imagine the nose would be.
And I echo your sentiments, Lockie. I think this is such a great distillery. I actually didn't get a chance to visit this place till 2017, so what's that, 7 years ago now. The most unassuming, beautiful place, and it's probably one of the places where there's less of that industrial factory feel. It is more hands-on. It's much smaller. It's still one of the old distilleries that still has its worm tubs. I think I'm right in saying if you go back far enough, it grew out of the DCL stable of what we would call Diageo today. It's not Diageo these days. But yeah, very old school, still very old fashioned. You pass it as you almost leave Speyside on your way to Huntly. So if you're in the Speyside district and you're visiting, say, Glendronach, you're heading up Glendronach way, you'll pass this about the halfway mark. It's in the middle of a paddock. You've almost got to turn, you're driving, you've got to look to the left to sort of pick it in between the cows and some fields. And it's just the most glorious spot, beautiful distillery. And I agree with you. I think you mentioned, it did go through that phase. When was it? 6 or 7 years ago when it started to promote its own peated whiskies, because they were doing limited peated runs during the year. And they came out with Celtic names, which none of us can pronounce or remember these days.
The Ruta, the Flauta, the Cutter, the other ones. But that was.
I was about to yell bingo. You almost said them all. Well played. That was.
That was about 10 years ago, I believe. About 2014, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
That they all kind of hit the market. I just remember because that was the first time I started working in the whiskey industry.
Right.
And they were brilliant whiskies as well, and cheap.
Yeah, and it's worth, time is so important when you talk about whiskey. You've got to talk about the timestamp, and so cast your mind back to 2014. There was the boom had well and truly kicked in. Lagavulin and Lafroig were both experiencing shortages, and all of a sudden people started to think, well, is there peated whiskey made on the mainland? And you had Ardmore and this distillery and a couple of others start to sort of play into the mix. I was about to say Ben Romick, but that's not right. The other one up near Elgin came into the play as well. So yeah, when they came out with those peated offerings at the time, it was perfect timing because there was actually a shortage of some of the more well-known Islay distilleries in Australia at that time.
Yeah,
and let's be honest, they were great whiskies. I remember was it the Flauta? That was a stunning dram.
And so was the Ruta, and all of these were named after peat cutting implements, basically spades. They were named after spades. But they were different peat levels, and it was them just trying to experiment with different peat levels for their whiskey. And I'm going to be honest with you, every single one of them was fantastic. But the Flauta was definitely the best.
Yeah.
From memory. But their peated spirit's great, but they have this beautiful biscuity, creamy, and lemon zest character that I don't. It's so harmonious, and in bourbon cask, it's brilliant.
Lockie, do you have a favorite soda water that you use in highballs?
I have seen a couple of questions come in about highballs. So, as for soda water and highballs, I tend to just use Fever Tree or San Pellegrino as a sparkling water. Depends on either what's available to me at the time or what whiskey I'm using it with, if I'm going to be particularly precious about it. But in the way I make my highballs, I tend to want something with a bit more carbonation because it will lose carbonation as it hits the spirit. So it depends on what I'm trying to make. The other question that I've seen here is any tips for making a great summer highball? And
You're
that
gonna love
Alejandro likes
January
to,
outturn.
yeah, I was about to say, yeah, we've got a little article in January Outturn about exactly that. I think the way I was taught, and a lot of the research I did, is about managing how your spirit and soda water interact. Now, a lot of people tend to just go, okay, you put your spirit in, put your ice in, you put your soda water in, give it a swazzle, there you go, right? It's effectively just a whiskey and soda. The highball has been perfected in Japanese cocktail culture, and they've really understood the science behind it. And you want to have your spirit be the same temperature as close to the same temperature as your ice and your soda water to really get the integration going properly, and also minimize your dilution so the carbonation doesn't lose. You don't lose as much carbonation, and you want to minimize your dilution as a whole so you can still really feel that spirit character coming through, right? Now, I've got personal things that I really like about highballs, which I tend to avoid using sherry cask whiskey because I find sometimes they can become really astringent and really bitter, especially if they're Spanish oak or French oak. American oak sherry tends to be pretty good, but that's few and far between. I really love cask strength peated highballs. Some of my favorites have been some of the Society 42s and 16s and 53s and 10s. Bourbon cask, younger, just absolutely work beautifully in highballs. But that's a personal thing, and I understand that some people will struggle with that. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
it's all whiskey dependent.
and you all can read more about it in January Outturn, which will be out next Friday for a preview.
Yeah,
what's
sorry, I was going to say, as Dave Cook has just said, SodaStream, that's perfect. As long as you've got the temperature right, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I've never I mean, I don't see why not, but I've never really considered using a soda stream for highballs. Like, it's just never crossed my mind. I mean, it makes sense if you have one. I don't.
I mean, yeah, I'd love to, especially with the way I drink soda water. So
My
of course.
problem with SodaStream was, and maybe this is a Sydney thing, but it would really accentuate the chlorine in the water. That was the big thing I had to overcome.
It definitely depends on the water source that you use. I really envy the people who live in around Mount Kosciuszko, like in Jindabyne. That is still the best water I've tasted in Australia.
Yeah,
It's the perfect place to be drinking whiskey, just generally.
very true.
But yeah, like the water there is just exceptional. If that's what I could use every single day, that's what I'd be using.
Yeah.
Hobart is also really, really good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Condolences to all our Adelaide viewers tonight.
Yeah, that is. Oh, I would say that's probably the second worst water I've had in Australia.
But also, lucky Adelaide members for actually picking up a new partner bar just in the last week. Memphis Slims as well.
Oh, what a segue!
Yeah, as of 2 days ago.
Teamwork. Yeah. So American whiskey and single malt and bourbons, I believe, and some ryes. Oh, bit early there, Lucky.
And we will also be hopefully doing an event to launch them to members in January, ideally.
Yeah, January or early Feb. So
Or
Adelaide members,
early
keep
Feb.
an eye out. And Sydney members, we didn't forget about you because you also have a new partner bar, Nola, in
Barangaroo.
Barangaroo. Yeah,
Yeah.
still getting my head around the Sydney suburbs, but
Which for Sydney members, it's actually about a 100-meter walk from where the old Shirt Bar partner barber used to be. So if you ever went to our partner bar at Shirt Bar, it's about 100 meters just further towards the water.
And
okay.
about 100 meters away from Neat Pete, which is on the other side.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Neat Pete's a bit more interesting. You've got to
Yes.
you have to know the secret knock to get upstairs in that one. But
Yeah.
Dov Burns, also Brisbane. Yep. So a few months ago, we also picked up Savile Row, which has been exceptional. Will Beverley and the team over there have been fantastic, and we've already had a couple of great events. And if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, Burns Day Dramming at Savile Row on the 25th of January, Robert Burns Day, and RAC in the evening, 25th, for Burns
Sydney.
Supper. Yeah.
And we want to be doing a lot. Sorry.
No, you go, mate.
We want to be doing a lot more work with Adelaide and Brisbane as well going forward. So we also want to build that whiskey scene in Brisbane. So if you want, please send me your favorite whiskey bars to go to in Brisbane and in Adelaide, and also tell me what you'd like to see event-wise, and we'll try our best to grow that as well and make it more enjoyable for everyone.
Please forgive me. I just have got a big storm here in Sydney, and my internet just dropped for 10 seconds. So I just missed the last 15, 20 seconds of dialogue there. But
that's all right. Well, just plugging Adelaide and Brisbane. Paul Hamilton Brown has just said he needs to try Sydney's whiskey scene, maybe Burns Night. Definitely Burns Night, Paul. Grab your tickets now before they disappear, because the last few Sydney events have flown off.
Come on down, Paul. I'll make this promise to you. I'll pour you an extra special loud dram on the night.
You heard it here
I
first.
did use the word loud then. I said loud dram.
So we sorry, Andrew, you've going to cap us
anyone else
off.
finding this whiskey is becoming increasingly sherried with time?
I've just found it incredibly sherried. So, you know how I was talking earlier on about the 55 being really beautifully balanced in the sherry coming into that particular spirit. Noctu has a bit more room to be battered around by cask, comparatively to the 55. This tastes like the best sherry cask you've ever had, but it also just tastes like really boozy sherry.
Yeah.
It's real sticky, and it gets stickier.
Really boozy Oloroso.
And I tell you what, at $180 for a cask strength single malt 60.9%, that's, well, I can see why it's malt of the month. That's a brilliant
and why it's also a sold out, unfortunately.
Really?
It's sold out fast.
November and December malt of the month, both special labels sold out. Good news though, as some of you may have spotted around socials, we are actually getting the S in the winter series as well. The last S, not the first S of SMWS. So our Burns Day bottling will be coming late November and exclusively previewed at the Burns events in Brisbane and Sydney. So another great reason to grab a ticket. But speaking of sherry, Distillery 10 has some great sherry extra matured drams, and I reckon 10.230 with an insane name of seared langoustine tails and caramelized bacon is has its time to shine right now.
Are you allowed to use that many words in a society name? That's a lot, isn't it?
It's getting up there. I mean, riding a duck bareback up Mount Etna, I feel like that was slightly more.
Is every letter of the alphabet in this name?
Only if you use the American spelling of caramelized.
Okay.
Damn, they win again.
Just on the side, Adam, full marks for your segueing tonight. You're doing beautifully as we go from dram to dram.
Thank you. I'm just it's one of I mean, yeah, I assume everyone's in for the long haul, but obviously having 8 drams, a slightly longer live stream, but it's fitting for the end of the year, really.
It is.
And I definitely need someone to keep me in line because I'll talk all day about these whiskies.
I know, and all great information, which we love to hear, and I'm sure everyone's enjoying it. And yeah,
Sometimes you're at an event, either as a punter or even if you're up the front of the room hosting, and you reach a point where you just think, man, it's time for something peated. And that's exactly where this lineup just got me to.
Also, having that 115 before this is perfect.
Yes.
I think that order was the way to do this.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful build-up, hitting a nice crescendo.
Yep. No, well played.
This is I mean, this is just great on the nose. It's just like I don't actually want to say it's the classic Society Sherried 10, because this is, I don't know if it's just because that Merry Christmas is still wafting around my environment, but it's almost a little bit nutmeggy.
Mm.
I mean, it's
this is almost at that point where and this is a thing that whiskey nerds seriously nerd out about and argue about. It's a stupid point of argumentation. But at what point does a finish stop being a finish and become a second maturation? So we've got an 8-year-old whiskey here, and it spent 4 years in one cask and then 4 years in the second one. So, for most people's definition of what makes a finish, this is not a finish. This is a second maturation. It spent equal time in both casks, and the result is just stunning, I have to say.
Well, the terminology of extra maturation or a second maturation is about hitting the point where it actually is aged, where it becomes a legal whiskey within Scotland. So, for example, 3 years and 1 day in Scotland. So it has to be matured in a second cask for 3 years and 1 day to be a second maturation. It's not a finish. Anything younger than that is a finish.
Yeah, and the Society does very few finishes. When we do get into another cask, it's pretty much 90% of them are extra maturations.
And most of those exceptions are to the Heresy series.
And
that, again, few and far between comparatively, but...
Dave Cook, I appreciate the powers that be not jamming 8 drams into 1 hour. Stay tuned for next month. No, just kidding. We're back to regular programming next month. Betty Petrie, Nectar of the Gods. I did, when I put this in the lineup, I was like, Betty's going to appreciate this because I know you love your peated whiskey, and we share a birthday, so very bacon. That's a great note, isn't it?
Every year?
Like bacon with a bit of maple syrup. Yeah, every year it's actually the same date. Would you believe it?
Wow,
cannot believe it.
I know.
In this digital age too. I mean,
in this economy.
I get a lot of hot sauna rocks, like the steam.
Oh wow! What a call!
Yeah,
hot sauna rocks, man.
On the nose, I presume that's a nose.
In 30 years, I've never heard that as a descriptor in whiskey, and yet I instantly now want to use that tomorrow.
And struck flint as well.
Yeah. Oh, struck flint. Okay, so that's interesting note. So are you getting some cordite notes? Maybe
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah, I'm definitely getting that.
When in my younger years, I did a bit of what's the word for it? Target shooting, right? Competitive rifle shooting, and so
last week.
Exactly. So the smell of cordite is something I'm quite familiar with, and there's people often make the mistake of mixing cordite and sulfur, and they are very different things. And the moment you use the S word with reference to a sherry, if you use the word sulfur and a sherry cask, it's a very negative connotation. Cordite is not a negative connotation. So you can have a sherry cask and it can be slightly dirty, But if the note you're getting is cordite, it's not that same negative sulfur taint. And there is a touch of it here. I agree with you, but it's for me, that cordite I associate with gunpowder is a pleasant note, not a negative one.
I don't believe this is cask derived as well. Because I find this on peated tens regardless.
Yeah.
I find struck flint on unpeated tens.
Right.
That sparky kind of rock against rock kind of note. It's just something that I remember from when I was camping a lot when I was a kid.
I agree with you. The stoniness is a descriptor for whiskey. You can have, and particularly wet stone. I mean, I used to use that descriptor all the time. So I concur. It's a tangible thing that you can, I was about to say, put your finger on. You can put your taste buds on.
Well, that's it. So minerality in general, even though it's not something that is directly involved in the whiskey making process, it does come out flavor wise. And I see it a lot because I grew up on the coast. I grew up in Wollongong, grew up on the ocean. Like the smell of hot sand, I find a lot in whiskey. I find that the smell of the rocks on the ocean. You can, like limestone, sandstone, all those things. They're quite different to me, and I find them a lot in whiskey. But for me, I find a bit of sandstone, and I find a bit of that struck flint, like the actual flint rocks struck against another rock to get that sparky kind of. And then that sauna rocks is those hot sauna rocks with the water poured or the steam coming off them. That's something I find, and that minerality is all coming from the spirit for me.
That is gorgeous. I'm so appreciative of what you've just said, and that's amazing. Now you use the word sandstone, and you just mentioned Wollongong as well. So you're a New South Welshman. For other viewers in other cities, sandstone's not readily prevalent in Melbourne, is it?
No, I don't believe so. No.
You're bluestone down there. So I mean, I use sandstone frequently as a descriptor and something I can associate with, particularly as a structural engineer, because I'm on excavation sites all the time, and we cut our sandstone here in Sydney. So it's a smell and aroma that I'm very familiar with. But it is fascinating when you reach for descriptors that are very, I guess, localized to your own upbringing and so on. And I'm always interested in how those things translate to other people around the country.
Well, that's it. So our understanding of flavor is entirely derived from our personal experiences, right? So where we grew up, the food that we ate, the dirt that we rolled around in as kids, the things that happened to us completely derive our understanding of flavor. I talk a lot about that in general in tastings or whatever I've done in the last 10 years. Because I've got all this understanding of flavor purely because my father was a chef for 40 years around Sydney. And we were raised with this understanding of, this curiosity for food and flavor. We'd be walking down the street and he'd pull a leaf off a tree and he'd say, "Have a smell of that, take a bite of it," just to see what it tasted like.
Yeah.
He knew that it wasn't toxic to us. We didn't, but we just trusted him on it. And so that's what we would do as kids. And I find myself still doing that today. I'd walk down the street, I'd pull it down, pull a leaf apart, have a nose. And it's just our understanding of flavor. I have this one tasting note that I found it was a Kalila once, an independently bottled Kalila, I believe, from Adelphi, that I tasted once. And it reminded me of this one experience running from, if anyone on this is from Wollongong or has been to Wollongong, from North Beach to when I was at the time was called South Beach, it's now called City Beach, across the sandstone shelving along there, like the sandstone cliffs and shelves along there. I was running from beach to beach with my dad and my brother, and I tripped over and I face planted into one of the rock pools. I had sand, sandstone, salt water. I also had chipped one of my teeth and cut one of my lips. So I had blood and chipped teeth rattling around in my mouth. And this whiskey tasted like that. And I'd completely forgotten about this experience because I would have been quite young, but I tasted this whiskey and I just went, all right, I'm back there. I'm on the ocean.
Yeah.
I've just got blood and teeth and sandstone and sand in my mouth and salt water, and that's all I could taste.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, that sense of that sense memory, that olfactory sense memory, is so important to how we appreciate whiskey.
Yeah, it really transports you.
Mm.
And no memory of that, and then bang, back into it.
Yeah.
As I
Exactly.
understand that the part of our brains that stores memory, as the hippocampus or something, is right next to the same part that processes aromas, and so that's why there's that distinction between, not distinction, association between childhood smells and memory.
It's also an evolutionary thing where it's all about keeping ourselves alive. So we have one thing one time, it didn't kill us, therefore it's safe to eat.
Yes.
Like that's what its purpose is, but now we use it to understand whiskey.
And it's ingrained into you
at
a very young age, isn't it? As you say, it's evolution. I mean, I'm so thankful to this day that my dad gave me Glenfarclas when I was 6 months old, because it's absolutely set me for the rest of my life. It's been great.
I have noticed that one. Yeah.
What a love. Sorry, just returning to the whiskey at hand here. What a lovely drop.
That's a great drop. There was some notes that came through as well. I mean, Dave Cook, heavily peated, very different to lightly peated 10s. Absolutely.
And I think that's also, it's 8 years old, so it's got some youthfulness to it. And for those who don't know, for peated whiskies, the older they get, the more the peat, what's the word? Dissipates. Thank you. So, if you want to get the punchiest, peatiest dram you can possibly get, get by a young whiskey. And at 8 years old, this one still has that, which I think is amazing.
Dave Cook, I wonder why I don't get marine diesel from whiskey more often. My dad was in the Navy for 20 years and in diesel subs for half of that. I mean, everyone's different at the end of the day. So what works for one human might not necessarily work exactly the same way for the other. And that also is what makes flavors so impressive, and everyone's palates and olfactory senses completely different.
Exactly.
Dave, I mean, my dad was in the Navy for 30 years, so we have some heritage there. Sorry, was he 37 years? I hasten to add. He joined at the age of 13 and left at 50. So yeah, so a lot of that maritime naval history that I connect with a lot of my whiskey descriptors. So yeah, absolutely.
Petrie, I like the heavily peated, has a better effect. Yes, Betty, very passionate. We love it.
I'll go back to that note about how very different to the lightly peated. This distillery 10, is very versatile in their spirit character, right? They started experimenting with peated spirit in a modern sense in the late 80s, early 90s, but we didn't really see any of that prop.
I can tell you exactly there, because it was through the Scotch Whisky Society that people became aware that this distillery was doing peated runs. They did 2 experiments, one in 94 and one in 98. And no one knew they existed until the society bottled them, because Highland Distillers, which owned this distillery at the time, did it with the intention of the casks going into Famous Grouse, which they also owned at the time. And they deemed the experiments a failure. So they made these peated runs in 94 and again in 98, thought they failed, so they sold them to the society and we bottled them.
And then they started again in 2002. They kept some of that stock because in 2004 released their very first peated core range release. But then they talk about how they started making peated whiskey in 2002. And that math doesn't work out.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And I've tasted that bottling as well from 2004, the Moyne 2004. And it was good. It was interesting.
Yeah.
But I tasted some of that 94 and 98 distillate from SMWS as well. In some of those old paper label bottles.
Yes.
Tasted 1 or 2 of those. Actually, one quite recently.
That was an amazing experience at the time, because when they got bottled and brought into this country, and I'm going to say 2006, 2007, I might be out by a year or two there. That was very much at a time when, peated whiskey came from Islay. There were at the time, there were 7 operating distilleries on Islay, and only 5 of them made peated whiskey. And the other 2, Brook Laddie and Bunnahaven, were famous for not making peated whiskey. So when 10 came along with this experimental peated stuff, it was really out there at the time, and it got the membership of the society really excited. It was such a treat to put that on at our events and just get that feedback, because suddenly there was a new player on the block. There was a new kid on the block that hadn't been there up to that point in time. It was very exciting stuff.
And I guess the essence of that is, the society is an opportunity for distilleries to showcase what they don't usually do. And in Distillery 10's case, is exactly what that was.
Yes, indeed.
The distillery has done that the society's done that all the way through its 40 years, is painting distilleries that you might not see fervently in a new light. Certain distilleries like 96, their core ranges, and Distillery 1 as well. They're distilleries that are famous for their sherry. Society paints it with a bourbon brush. So it's just cool to see that versatility within these spirits.
Paper label crash course in 30 seconds. Go.
Okay. I think Derbidge would be a better one for this, but the early bottlings which were more, I guess. So I'll pull one of these ones out.
I bet say
this is the current livery, and then the previous bottlings before this were what some people call the red codes or the bold codes. Had a different logo on them, and also had the code emboldened in red along here. And the bottling before that had an old, almost classic whiskey bottle, green glass, with a longer paper label with the original whiskey code. It was very old school looking whiskey bottling.
I'm trying to share a screen here.
Gotcha.
Can you bring that up, Adam?
There you go.
So those are what some people refer to as the old paper labels.
Literally paper labels.
Literally paper, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did they change over to the I guess the more modern format? Was it was the early 2000s?
2009. And
so late 2000s.
2009. It coincided with our bottling hall changing across to Glenmorangie system at that time.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Because I started working alongside the society in 2014. So I, for a long time, had only seen what some members refer to as the bold code or the red code era. And then it changed to what we now know.
Yeah.
Over multiple iterations.
Yeah, I was about to say that there's been a few little massages and along the way,
slow shifts along the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Dave, I haven't been lucky enough to try any of those bottlings yet. I'm sure there'll be an opportunity in the near future, Dave. Do not fret. There's always something kicking about, members still have some, sometimes bars even just have some out of nowhere.
Yeah, I know.
Come to Sydney, Dave. There's a few members over here who will look after you.
Exactly right. As
I know that
as
Whiskey
is tradition with the Whiskey and Elman has a few as well. Yeah, as I said, some of the bars still have a few tucked away in their archives. I was just going to say, as is tradition with the live streams, I'll do a little sneak preview as well of what's to come, which is January our turn. So 2025 first outturn of the year preview available next Friday, midday Australian Eastern Daylight Time. It's all about highballs. It's all about mixing it up, cocktails, summer refreshers, and for those of you who are interested in more highball talk and more ways to mix your whiskey, then there's some great reads in there from Lachlan. And also, Betty made mention of she always enjoys this time of the month. Betty, I am here to tell you that Tuesday, the 28th of January is our next live stream. So keep that in your diaries. This has been extremely amazing. It's been a great
what's
live
great?
stream.
I don't know how you gentlemen and everyone at home view these things, but I tend to sort of like pour out that much for a dram. at these things.
I'm the same. Yeah.
And I couldn't help myself. I had to refill and exhaust the 10. The 10 got emptied.
Oh.
It was so good.
I've still got a bit in my glass of each one as well. And I'm going back to that one. I'm going to go back through them in order just to see how they've changed. Like I said earlier, I like to see how my palate evolves and going through these whiskies and how it challenges me, and also how they've rested in the glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. And I'm sorry if I keep on sort of harking back to ancient history, but the Scotch Malt Whisky Society pioneered the use of lids at tasting events. When you went to tasting events in Australia pre-2005, 2006, everything got poured out. And if the event went for 2 hours, well, by the time you got to the last dram, it had been breathing for 2.5, 3 hours, given that the guys probably poured it long before you walked into the room. And so that whole thing of whiskey changing, by the time you got to the last dram, it was not the same dram. And some of them weren't always as fresh as they should have been. And it was actually... at the risk of sounding a little self-indulgent, it was myself in 2005-06 that said, you know what, we should actually put some lids on these, because when you do a masterclass, it can be some time until you get to the dram, and things were oxidizing. And I went to a lot of whiskey events around the country prior to 2006, and no one ever thought to put lids on. So that whole thing of keeping your dram fresh and or seeing how it changes over time, again, is a bit of a society innovation in this country. So something we can hang our hat on.
And the fire's still burning in New South Wales and Brisbane as well.
Literally.
For a fact. Yeah. Well, Andrew, Lachlan, thank you very much. I think that might be a good time to cap that 1 hour and 50-minute live stream.
Yeah.
And cap the year. So thank you all to everyone, all the members and the guests who tuned into all our live streams throughout the year. I can safely say that 2025 is going to be a very fun year, and monthly live streams and virtual tasting packs will continue. So keep an eye out for that starting from January. Again, preview next Friday. And if you feel like it, Last Drops is still going. Use the code LASTSHIP25 when you order over $400 for complimentary shipping. Lads, it has been an absolute pleasure. And Lachlan,
Thank you, Adam, as
congratulations on your first live stream with
Thank you.
SMWS. Felt
And
right
cheers
at
to
home.
everyone.
Thank you, one and all. Merry Christmas.
Have a good Christmas.
And we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.